I call to order the regular meeting for the Board of Directors of Development Butte Irrigation District for Wednesday, August 13th, 2025. Mr. Esslinger, could you please give us.
Father, thank you for this opportunity to come before you and give honor and glory to your name. We pray this day for the Health and Butte Irrigation District Board, staff, employees, and farmers of this district. Guide each member of the board to make wise decisions over every matter that comes before them. Thank you for the summer rain that has provided moisture to the land. We all pray for a supernatural snowpack this coming winter in our northern mountain watersheds to replenish the water in all of our reservoirs in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Director Colquitt, would you lead us in the pledge of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all very much. So an introduction guests, we'll start from my left of Toronto.
Morning, Ryan Frono, New Mexico Irrigation District.
Michelle Estrada Lopez, Bureau of Reclamation. W. Allen, Bureau of Reclamation.
Ray Hartwell, Summit Conservation Strategies.
Kirsten Neff, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation.
Warren Mike Riley, of the state engineer.
Joel Gonzalez, OSC intern.
Chris O'Gean, EBID employee.
Charles Gray, EBID employee.
Bureau of Environmental DOE.
Thank you very much. Welcome. Madam Secretary, would you please announce those that are present online?
Certainly present online, we have Anthony Collin from NMDA, Alfred Peralt, OSC, Delise Maciel from EBID, DL Sanders, Legal Counsel, Jerry Melendez, James Narvise, JR Hennessy, Leah Diaz, EBID employee, Phil King, consultant, Rita Kreitz, Sky DeVore, and Tammy Dion, EBID.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. Thank you for those attending virtually. We welcome you all to our board meeting. Next item on the agenda is recognition of service. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're recognizing the service of two employees today, one of which is with us, Charles Gray. Charles has been with EBID for 5 years as an equipment operator, and he's recently joined our dedicated drain crew. So we'll be putting him to work on our drains. And Chris Holguin is his supervisor. Chris, if you'd like to tell us how wonderful Charles is.
Yeah, he's a pain in the side, but a very qualified individual. He does a very thorough work, very good job. If he has any questions, he doesn't worry about calling. My phone is always being receiving calls from Charles. But yes, he's been at it very well. Right now, unfortunately, he was on our drain on Butte Road, but that machine moved to the bottle drain, dealing with that problem right now. That machine will probably be there for at least another month. That's probably when he gets back, he'll probably get started there. Until they'll be moving back to work on Butte Road. But yeah, he's got a lot of work. He won't run out of work.
Come on.
Thank you.
Charles, thank you very much.
Thank you.
For your service. Your dedication brings great credit to yourself and the irrigation district. On behalf of the members, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
That's wonderful.
The other employee we're recognizing is Nicholas Garris Heath. Unfortunately, Nick couldn't be with us this morning, but we will make sure that he gets his points.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. And thank you to Nicholas for your dedicated service. That brings us to the approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes in the agenda for today? Hearing none, we'll proceed with the agenda as presented. That brings us to the approval of the minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? I have a couple. On the first page, there is discussion about the Caballo Outlet Fund. The fourth line states that reclamation crews removed much of the obstruction, but flow is still limited to around 200 CFS based on the gate rating equation. It wasn't limited to 200 CFS. It had been the obstruction was reducing flow by 200 CFS. So I recommend changing that to say, but flow is still limited to 200 CFS less than normal unobstructed flow. In Mr. Narvaez's report, after the bullet points on the delivered quantities of water, the second sentence of the next paragraph says that the district diverted a total of 66,629 acre feet from an allotment of 87,342 acre feet. That should say allocation instead of allotment. Those are the corrections that I have. Are there any other corrections or additions to the minutes? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion to approve the minutes as corrected.
I make a motion to approve the minutes as corrected.
I have a motion from Director Colquitt, seconded by Director Karai, to approve the minutes as corrected. Any further discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? In the opinion of the president, the motion, in the opinion of the president, the ayes have it, the motion passes unanimously. We've approved the minutes for the July 9th, 2025 board meeting. Next item on the agenda, presentations. Dr. Neff.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
You just bring up my presentation here. I guess so.
For all that talk.
All right, I think I've met most of you all, been here a couple times before to talk about the drought resilience efforts initiative that the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, or NFWF as we call ourselves, is working on with reclamation and the ISC. And I'm just coming today to give you all an update on what's been going on the past few months and where we're headed. So as a reminder, the goals of this initiative are to fund projects, multi-benefit projects that but reduce damage from stormwater and sediment, increase aquifer recharge from stormwater, improve infrastructure to manage water. And then in all of these projects, we want to see a habitat benefit for native riparian birds. So here we're talking about southwestern willow flycatcher and yellow-billed cuckoo. The ultimate goal here is to make the irrigation district more and the watershed more resilient, right? So we're trying to identify projects that are both going to have a benefit to EBID in terms of operations and have a benefit to the birds, which is who we as the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation are focused on. So I've shown this slide before as a reminder. This is the funding mechanism for this program. All of the funding is coming from reclamation. There's a little bit coming directly to NFWF that we already have in a cooperative agreement from 2 years ago that is appropriated money from Congress. And then there's the $60 million in Inflation Reduction Act funding. You've probably heard about several times. Let me get that out of your way so you can. Here we go. And that 60 million, the contract is in place between Reclamation and ISC. We are still working on the split that's going to leave some of the funding for the program with ISC and send some of it to NIFWIP for these multi-benefit project implementation. So our first step in the process was NIFWIP contracted with the New Mexico Water Resources Research Institute here at New Mexico State to do the phase 1 of this effort, which was to identify and evaluate projects for implementation. So we're calling this the long name of the New Mexico WERI Stakeholder-Driven Project Prioritization Process, or the WERI process for short. The project identification period we're saying is complete. WERI hosted 5 stakeholder meetings in 4 locations, including Sunland Park, Las Cruces, Hatch, and Truth or Consequences over the past several months. And at those meetings, they introduced the initiative to stakeholders and distributed a survey and project idea submission form. Through that process, they received 101 survey responses and 63 projects submitted. And I know EBID staff submitted some projects to that will be part of the process. We're now moving into the project evaluation phase. WERI has already begun preparing their surface and groundwater assessments and spatial watershed scale restoration assessments that they're going to use to evaluate these projects based on their location. Obviously, the hydrology of the specific project site is going to have a real impact on the effectiveness of that project. And there's a lot of smart people at NMSU and here at the district that know the system and the watershed really well. And we want to make sure that we're prioritizing projects that are in the right place hydrologically. WERI is going to be conducting some more outreach to the project, to the folks that submitted projects, where maybe they don't have enough information to do an evaluation, so they may be coming back and asking for more information about the project itself. And WERI is also going to be acting as a matchmaker, so they've received some projects that are geographically kind of related or close together, and it would make sense for those 2 project submitters to work together. So that's going to be a step in this process, is sort of matchmaking to try to create project efficiencies, get people working together where appropriate. And then they're also preparing for a second round of stakeholder meetings. And that second round of stakeholder meetings is going to be focused on getting feedback from stakeholders on what parameters, what things we should be considering in evaluating these projects. And ultimately, the end goal of all of this is to get to that menu of projects to select from that we can then plug in this funding to once all the funding mechanisms are in place. Any questions about where we are now? Okay, so this next section, this is just as an FYI, something else that NIFWIP is working with Reclamation on in a broader geography than just the lower Rio Grande project area. So in last September, Reclamation entered into a separate cooperative funding agreement with NIFWIP to produce a bird habitat implementation plan for Reclamation's Middle Rio Grande and Rio Grande project areas. We're calling it the BHIP for short. And the idea is, there's been a lot of talk over the years about the need for habitat for these threatened and endangered species, but there hasn't really been a coordinated analysis of where those species are now, potential habitat sites that we could be improving to benefit them across this whole landscape from basically Cochiti down to Leesburg. So NIFWIP is being the coordinator on that. We've hired Tetra Tech to do the analysis of the current habitat and extent. And then that analysis is going to feed into the plan. And the goal is at the end of this project, which is a 2-year project, we'll have a plan to share that can identify priority areas for habitat improvement, which I think that there's a lot of a lot of connections and overlap between what we're trying to do in our multi-benefit projects here within Lower Rio Grande and what this plan is gonna identify in terms of priority activities. So I just wanted to make sure that you all were aware that was going on as well, in case you hear someone mention the BHIP or the bird habitat implementation plan. That's also us. You can also ask me. And that's all I have for today. So there, I forgot my business cards today, so if you need my contact information, definitely take it from here. But at this point, I just want to take questions, answer any questions you all might have about where we are in the process.
Questions for Dr. Neff? Dr. Neff, do we have a deadline to actually be completed with the full funding and the construction project?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one for reclamation as well as me. And ISC. Currently, the cooperative agreement between reclamation and ISC for the funding ends 2028. But there is opportunity, I think, for extension on that.
Yeah, I think it's, end of fiscal year 2030, so September 2031.
Is the actual drop dead date on the funding.
So any project construction would need to be completed by that date?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Right,
Dr. Neff, why did you stop at Leesburg? What chose that point?
Because that's the end of reclamation's project. Beyond that, it's IBWC.
Other questions? Dr. Neff, it's good to see you.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming and presenting to us and keeping us up to date with this. These projects are critical to the future of our region. And I'm grateful for your continued assistance.
Glad to be here.
Next, we have a presentation from the Bureau of Reclamation.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
As I said earlier, I'm Michelle Estrada Lopez. I'm from Bureau of Reclamation in Albuquerque. I'm the Special Projects Officer. And I'm pretty sure your favorite negotiator, right? That's it.
You can take that to the bench.
All right, so I thought since I was down here, I'm gonna sit. That's okay.
Yes.
I would just give you guys a general update about what's going on in the Middle Valley with reclamation. So that's most of what I have prepared for you all today, and I'm gonna share from my screen because they updated me to Windows 11 and I can't figure out how to use Adobe and send things to you all. Share. That's good. Okay, great. Minimize it. Scan this. Okay, so what this is our we do a buckets, we call them buckets. So this is a snapshot of all of the reservoirs and the different types of water that are currently in them. And so we produce these monthly. And so you can see, starting up at Heron, it's only 15% full. It's been not a great year for the the San Juan Basin and the Colorado Basin either. So we haven't been able to divert very much for our San Juan Trauma contractors. And then we just split it out by the major contractors. So you can see the Water Utility Authority has most of that water that's currently in Heron. Then we go down to El Vado, we're at 13% full. And so we'll talk a little bit more about El Vado in a moment, because I'm gonna update you all on the construction project. And so we'll talk about what water's in there during that. And then in Abiquiu, it's 60% full. 88,000 acre feet of that is the Water Authority, and then the other San Juan Trauma contractors. The PMP water is currently stored in both El Vado and Abiquiu under our new agreement with the Water Authority that goes through the life of the first 10 years of this El Vado construction, so we can store the Paramount water in Abiquiu. Cochiti's at its hold pool. So that's why we don't do a percentage. We keep, the Corps keeps that steady. And then you can see elephant mute caballo combined content 4%. You guys knew that. Yeah.
Say there's a chance.
All right.
And
So-
the buckets on the far left, I believe they say active conservation, something like that, but what are they representing?
Yeah, so that's where we're allowed to store the normal water. So anything above that would be flood control storage.
Thank you.
Okay. So I just give general notes on what's happening. So as of Monday, there's about 68.5 miles dry in the middle Rio Grande, and it's in the 3 reaches in 5 different segments. So it's a dry year. We are in Pryor and Paramount only operations in the Middle Valley. So that means that the non-Pueblo farmers are not irrigating at the moment. It's just the Pryor and Paramount lands of the 6 Pueblos that are getting irrigation water. So dry in the Middle Valley as well.
Let me be sure I understood that. MRGCB is not diverting water.
They're only diverting for the 6 Pueblos. The non-Pueblo farmers are not irrigating.
Okay.
They have the senior right. Okay, so let's talk
So the
about,
other ones are pumping, I guess?
most of them don't have
I don't think they will.
pumps.
Wow,
Some of the big farmers have some pumps,
okay,
but not, most of them don't.
okay,
So you'll know that most of them are alfalfa farmers, and that's part of the reason why is because they don't have that groundwater backup.
okay.
Mhm.
That was right. I'm in the morning.
All right. Does that look good? Okay. So, El Vado is our dam that's on the Rio Chama, and that's the main storage facility for the Mennonite Conservancy District. And as you know, we are currently in a major safety of dams project. So this is our current update. So just to remind you where we were at the end of 2024. So in May of 2024, we had to make the decision to terminate the construction contract due to unforeseen and unresolvable impacts. So that happened on May 2nd, 2024. And then over the summer, the contractor demobilized. So then what we did, which is standard after a major construction project, is we did a first fill test. And so what we did is we slowly filled El Vado up to about 25,000 acre feet, and we had to hold it at different increments and measure if there was any seepage or concerns with the facility. And we were very pleased that we are safely able to store about 25,000 acre feet of water. The water that we used to conduct that first fill test was San Juan Chama water. And so we are very grateful to our partners at the Water Authority and MRGCB in Santa Fe for allowing us to use their water to do that. So that's why we have about 25,000 in El Vado now, is because of that first fill test and our partners allowing us to use their water. So what are we doing in 2025? So we had to restart the corrective action study, which is a formal process for safety of dams projects. We had done one previously before we chose the first construction project. And so we have a lot of the data and a lot of the alternatives, but we're going back and we're collecting more data now that we have more information, since we lowered the reservoir and we were on the ground and able to see what was under the faceplate. So they're analyzing the alternatives, and we did some more field exploration. So you can see the barge that was out there. And they were doing some more investigation on the foundation materials under the reservoir and on the abutments. So what we are expecting now is that the design of whatever alternative they select will be completed in 2030. And the preliminary estimates on most of those options that we're looking at is going to take an additional 6 years after that to construct.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a big project. Still a significant amount of time before El Vado will be in a normal state again. And so this is our project manager, Carlos Aragon. He's in our office. And so if you have like specific technical questions, that is not for me. So you can reach out to Carlos on that. But that is where we're at on Elvado. We're hoping we're gonna do another first fill test, so to go above 25,000, but that'll depend on finding water that people will allow us to use to do that, and then where we're at on the design process.
Thank you, Ms. Struggle, as that brings me to the question I have, what level are you looking to do field testing with in Elvado's current condition?
So that's really up to the dam safety engineers, and we haven't been given information on that yet. They're still analyzing to just see what they would want to go to, and then our office would look for water to do that.
But there is an amount over 25,000 it could be that you're looking to test.
Mhm.
Water.
Yeah, and that would just give us flexibility, if, you know, the compact status changes, then we could store some amount of water for MRGCD in the future during this long process of the dam safety project.
What's the channel capacity between Elvado and Abiquiu? We know.
Well, below Abiquiu, it's 1,800. I don't,
I'm just wondering
Mhm.
if there are flood control considerations between Elvado and Abiquiu that should we get a really, really giant amount of snow upstream of Elvado, how would we manage that?
yeah, so what happened, not this year, but the year before and the year before that, is because the head is so low on Elvado, we couldn't even max out like the gates. It just wasn't coming out in near the channel capacity. We also did have clogging issues and plugging issues like you guys are having at Caballo, in both of those years. So that's more of the concern that we're thinking about, is if we have a big runoff, is making sure that we keep the outlet works open and functional so we can move the water through.
Thank you, Director Glacial.
First of all, Mr. President, from your lip to God's ears. The dam safety engineers, are they in-house or are they an outside engineering firm?
That's a good question. So they are in-house, they're in our Technical Services Center in Denver, but we've also, we're partnered with MRGCD, and they've hired engineers as well, so they are on the team that is developing the analysis.
Why does it take them 4 or 5 years to do the engineering and design? That seems like an awful long time. I'm not an engineer, so. You know.
I'm not that kind of an engineer. But this is a big endeavor. There's only 4 of these types of dams left in the world, and this is the only one that currently still is used for water storage. So I don't know if you're aware, Director Clayshult, but it's basically a rock and gravel dam covered with steel plates. And so there's just not a lot of experience in the world with fixing this type of facility.
Thank you.
Other questions for Mrs. Estrella Lopez? It's good to see you in person.
Good to see you too.
I'm glad that you came to present to us and appreciate the update very much.
You're welcome.
Madam Secretary, if you're able to, I'll give you a moment to try to open the log and see if people. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Next item on the agenda is water resources. Good morning, Dr. King.
Mr. Chairman, good morning, Mr. Chairman. Let me get organized here.
That's a great picture.
Yeah, that would, one of the guys up at, reclamation guys up at the Elephant Butte office sent that down yesterday, and that's what it looked like. I think Greg up there took this. But that is the outlet works in question, and you can see the part that's sticking up, the kind of rectangular part, is the that's where the stop logs go, so they're not, that's not really the main part of the intake. The round part you see down right at the water level is the main part of the intake, and you see it's got those tree trunks and smaller branches all the way down to little twigs plugging it up, and that was the problem.
I'm not a damn here, but there's your problem.
Yep. But the El Paso office reclamation guys there have just been great to work with on this. We made it through the season, and we are officially now, as of like this morning, finished for the season. There is still water coming out, but it is limited by a sandbar that basically holds an isolated upper pool in the reservoir that will only drain out as it seeps through the sandbar. So we just finished like this morning. El Paso got hit with a little runoff event down there right around Corshane Bridge last night, so call the season over. This is what we looked like as of August 11th. About 74,000 in Elephant Butte. 5,800 in Caballo. That has probably gone down just a little bit, but the rest of that is basically stranded dead storage that will seep out only very slowly. That gives us a total of about 80,000 in projects total storage. I took off the Colorado compact credit and 4,000 for San Juan Chama. I don't really know what that is. Michelle may have a better idea than I do, but that was the last I heard. So I threw in a nice round number there. And the bottom line is we're looking at about 69,000 acre feet in storage. Keep in mind that 2013 was the worst year in the history of the Rio Grande project for release from storage, when we released 169,000 acre feet. So we're 100,000 acre feet short of the worst year ever. So not releasable. We've got a total of about 12,900. We released from Caballo. This is a little bit iffy because the release was heavily affected by the plug. This is based on the cable flow, but this will need some QA/QC. But about 250,000 acre feet is what we're looking at for the release for the year, which is certainly better than 2013, but that's still just a terrible year for annual release. Also, net inflow into Elephant Butte is just almost zero, and it would not surprise me if it does get actually below zero, as the inflow is less than the evaporation. This is what the river is looking like upstream. Michelle showed you the reservoirs, but the river is in even worse shape. The upper one there is Ottawee Gauge, and you see the yellow line, which is the long-term median. This is a log scale, so that difference you see is pretty humongous. The Rio Grande de Albuquerque, that's not a log scale, but you see that the zero is right here. And so you see that right now the river is dry at Albuquerque. At San Marcial, it's been dry for quite a while with occasional little arroyo flows, but there's basically negligible flow coming out of the middle Rio Grande into Elephant Butte at this point. I was pretty shocked driving over the Alameda Bridge. This is the Alameda Bridge you see here. And I'm looking downstream at it, and that's what the river looks like at about 59 CFS. Last time I looked, it was down to about 30, and then of course by the time you get down to Central, it is zero. It is dry, and this kind of took me back to the lower Rio Grande back in 2004 or so, when we were going from a river that would have a base flow through the winter to drying up. You'll notice the clear water. This is all just groundwater exfiltration seeping back into the river. And I would not be surprised to see it go dry this far north, this far upstream at Alameda Bridge. Our precipitation didn't change much as a percentage of average. From last time, it went down slightly, but basically we're still in that sort of 3/4 range of total precipitation for the water year. Keep in mind, the water year begins in October and runs through September. Looking at the forecasts that came out on July 17th, you'll notice that for September through November, they are predicting below average precipitation in the upper Rio Grande, and certainly above average temperatures throughout. I looked the next 3 months forward, going from December through February, and they are again predicting below average, or the chances are that it will be below average precipitation and above average temperatures. And that is a situation that we've been in for a few years now. If we even get average precipitation, we're getting well below average runoff, and that is what we're basically looking at for next year. There's really no indication of any phenomenal snow season coming up. It could still happen, absolutely, but there's no indication that that's on the way now. Looking at the drought monitor, this is from July 1st, and you'll see that if we step forward to August 5th, we actually get a little bit of improvement, and that is just from the local precipitation that we've had. They're not a big improvement, but it went from, the darker colors dominating to the lighter colors dominating, so things did get a little better. The seasonal outlook, however, is still pretty bleak. The drought is forecast to persist throughout. So in conclusion, the release season is winding down right now. I wrote that last night. The release season is now over, although there is still water coming out of Caballo that is to drain it down so we can get in there and do maintenance. EBID or Elephant Butte Dam shut down on the 28th with a minimum of about 73,000 acre feet of storage. If you remember earlier in the season, I was suggesting that could go to a record low. It didn't go to a record low because of we wound up releasing less than we anticipated, and we've got a few thousand acre feet more or less in Caballo that is instead stored in Elephant Butte right now, so that we can drain Caballo out and get in there and do the maintenance. Mexico shut down on August 10th, and EP1 is going off charges. They are off charges, as I say now. The plan is that the cleanup of the Caballo outlet will start August 18th, and they think they'll finish it in a few days, certainly during that week. And we'll keep the gates open during that period, then close them once the outlet works are cleaned out. Clearly, the end of year usable storage will be very low, meaning that we're going to rely very heavily on the water year 2026 snowpack and resulting runoff. And again, I don't see a real big snow season coming. Let's hope I'm wrong on that. Bottom line is, I guess I'm sounding the alarm again here. Prepare for a very rough year next year. It could be sub 4 inches. Remember, in 2013, we had 3.5 inch allotment. hopefully we'll do better than that this coming year. But I think it's unlikely that we will make even a foot of allotment. So do plan on a pretty rough year. And on that cheerful note, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. King. Director Glacial.
Dr. King, what was the runoff into Elton Butte this year? How many acre feet?
It was dismal. I have not calculated it. It was well below average. I'm thinking probably, I don't know, Michelle, if you have an idea, I'm thinking probably under 200,000 acre feet.
Yeah, probably.
Thank you.
And one thing I will say is I expect this coming year to be worse, just because the river is so dry in that middle Rio Grande stretch right now.
Director Rosa.
Dr. King, you said that 69,000 acre feet was 100,000 acre feet short of 2013 level. What did you mean by that?
Well, in 2013, we released 168, 169,000. And so the actual releasable water we have available now is 100,000 less than that.
Oh, I see. So you're saying supposing we get zero inflows into Elephant Butte, then we're 100,000 acre feet below 2013, and we need at least 100,000 acre feet of inflows to match 2013 releases.
The 100,000 acre feet, what?
You're saying that we would need at least 100,000 acre feet of inflows with our current storage to match our worst release ever.
That's right.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
We'll break the record next year.
Other questions for Dr. King?
Might I ask one question? This DL.
Please, Mr. Sanders.
Hey, Dr. King, I do want to add to the parade of horribles you just listed. One of the things that was surprising to me, and I'm not sure I understand it correctly, but as the drought persists and as the higher elevations dry out, then that turned out to have a huge impact on runoff, just trying to recharge the subsurface terrain to increase the runoff, because it's like a sponge. That slow runoff just gets sucked up. So even though we were expecting back in the years you were talking about 2004, the runoff, we were surprised, was greatly reduced, because during that drought period, so much got sucked up, it's like a sponge. It's just waiting for water to come along, so it gets sucked up. So I can't remember what the reduction is. I want to say it was significant, but I don't really recall. So I was just wondering if you could illuminate the board about that additional problem. The longer the drought persists, that's kind of has even a greater impact on lower runoff.
Yeah, certainly the last 25 years have been a real education for me in the importance of temperature in that runoff.
Yeah.
Because, this dilemma we have where we get average snowpack and far less than average runoff is we're built on that spring runoff hydrograph. That's what Elephant Butte Dam was put in to capture and regulate to irrigate this area. And we've got just so many years now when the spring runoff absolutely fails due to exactly what you're talking about. The upper watershed is it's warmer, more arid than it historically was. And so the losses on the watershed mean that much less runoff. And, less water gets to the river, less river gets to Elephant Butte. And there we are.
Yeah. Then was one of those years, like right around 2003, maybe it was, when we had a lot of wind and all the snowpack sublimated.
That's right. 200,000 acre feet of runoff vanished.
Well, yeah. So that's another thing that's difficult to plan for.
Yep.
I just, it just concerns me, this drought situation, and we have all these things going on, and I just don't want to lose. I thought maybe it was important for the board to understand it's not just a matter of snowpack. It's easy to talk about it, like you said, but the nuances of getting it to Elephant Butte are just well, like you said, the river's drying out, so that's a problem. It becomes a bigger problem too. So,
And with the river, you know, it looks to me like, you know, if it dries up all the way to Alameda, that's
Yeah.
pretty unprecedented, I think. I'll have to pull the hydrant out there and see, but it's you know, it's gonna take a lot of water just to get it into the river, and then the river is gonna take a pretty big bite out of it going through the middle Rio Grande, so we're kind of twice cursed here.
yeah, it's bad. Okay, well, I just wanted to add to the parade of horribles for folks, so.
Thank you for that, Mr. Sanders. Any other questions for Dr. King? I want to piggyback his last statement about preparing for a potentially very short season. I'm going to push that a little further. This board and our members need to prepare for the possibility that there will not be an irrigation season next year. The district will do all that we can to maximize the utility of the resources that reach the reservoir. There are some important lessons from the 2013 season, which we generally don't want to repeat. Which means there is an amount of allocation where it makes sense not to try to deliver it, but to hold it to the following year. Those are hard decisions, and I just want our board and our members to know that there are decisions that need to be considered. Our members' input is valuable to inform this board, and this board's consideration of these hard decisions is important to start doing now. Thank you. Mr. Narvaez.
Good morning, everybody. Don't have anything to present for this board meeting. Hopefully, we'll get closer to some final numbers and do a better season recap. Still numbers to trickle in since they just shut down the release today. But hopefully next board meeting, we'll get closer to have a season recap and wrap it up in a bow and hope for snow.
Thank you very much, Mr. Narvaez. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Narvaez? Hearing none, that brings us to the next item on our agenda, which is general administrative. Ms. Byron.
First off is your usual cash balance report. This is as of last Thursday. It's showing that we still have good balances. As we do have some payments that haven't cleared the bank yet. Some of the interest or investment activity is reflective of the ins and outs we had in order to finance the grant purchases, but those have all flowed through and everything's caught up now. Some of our uncommon activity for the time period is we had our quarterly payment to BOR and we had our annual insurance payment. That's for July 1 through June 30th. We received some large receipts. We 186,000 and one payment for right of use payments, and we had a constituent funded project payment of 240,000. In June, our interest on our investments was 4.32. In July that we just got, it was 4.35. And I stand for questions.
Thank you very much. Questions for Mrs. Byron?
What was the insurance payment? What type of insurance is that?
So those insurances include property, liability for, say, our vehicles, general liability for our, all of our properties and everything. It also includes, employee dishonesty and directors, and officers insurance.
Thank you very much, Director Placeholder. Ms. Byram, I have kind of my regular question. Our cash has increased over the last 2 years by about $3.5 million. And about 800,000 since last year. My understanding is that quite a bit of that is grant projects where the funds haven't been expended yet. Approximately how much of that $3.5 million increase, how much do we have out there in encumbered money that has not been expended?
So the grants that I am aware of, I'll let Joe speak to his grants. We have about $300,000 of grant monies. And that's on that California lateral grant. The other ones that I have worked on are pretty much completed. We have been reimbursed for all of the ISC equipment funding that we expended. So we don't have any grant funds in advance at this time.
Mr. Franzois, zero. Okay.
We're all spent out.
Well, Mr. Smith, I commend your staff in being with their continued frugal expenditures. Difficult times for our members, and I appreciate the district's mindfulness of that. Any other questions for Mrs. Byram on the general financial report? Hearing none, that brings us to contract approvals. The first one is professional services contract for expert witness and consulting services to Dr. Bill King.
Yes, this is his annual renewal contract for his expert services. There are no changes, and this contract is for year 2 of 4.
That's just Director Sloan.
I make a motion to approve the contract.
I have a motion for Director Sloan to approve the contract for expert witness and consulting services to Dr. King. Seconded by Director Colquitt. Discussion. Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Opinion of the President, the ayes have it, the motion passes unanimously. Brings us to the approval of a professional services contract for expert witness consulting services to Dr. Casey Carroll.
This contract is, I believe also a renewal. There is a 3% increase in the rates due to inflation. That it's, otherwise the same.
Which renewal, I'm sorry, which renewal of this contract is it?
Carol?
Let's see, she didn't give that to me, so I'm not sure. I'll have to
Let's say somewhere. 4-year ending June 30th, 2028, so somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Mr. Smith says it is the second renewal.
Second year.
Second year. Thank you for that correction. Second year of the contract. Questions?
Make a motion to approve the contract.
Second.
I have a motion from Director Sloan, seconded by Director Colquitt to approve the professional service contract for expert witness and consulting services to Dr. Casey Carroll. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the opinion of the President, the ayes have it, motion passed unanimously. Brings us to the approval of professional services contract for hydraulic engineering services to Libin Underwood Engineering and Survey.
So this contract is an additional annual renewal. It has no rate changes. However, it does have 3 subcontractors that are being added to the contract. One for Dr. Blair Stringham, which is for canal modeling, control, and automation. one for Cause Engineering for Geotechnical Engineering and Geosystems Analysis, Inc. for Soil, Water, and Ecological Sciences Assistance. I believe that this is, year 2 out of 4.
Thank you. Questions on the contract for hydraulic engineering services? Hearing none, what's the will of the board?
I make a motion to approve the contract for hydro, help me out here. For
Hydraulic engineering.
hydraulic engineering services.
I have a motion from Director Colquitt, seconded by Director Ludwig, to approve the professional service contract for hydraulic engineering services to Live in Underwood Engineering and Surveying. Any further discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor of approving the contract, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Opinion of the president, the ayes have it, the motion passed unanimously. That brings us to the approval of professional services contract for legal services personnel at Kennedy, Moulton and Wells.
Yes, this is for the professional services contract under 60,000. There are no changes to the rates, and I believe it's year 2 of 4.
Thank you. Any questions on the contracts? Hearing none, what is the will of the board?
Make a motion to approve the contract.
I have a motion from Director Sloan to approve the professional services contract for legal services personnel. Kennedy, Moulton and Wells, seconded by Director Garai. Any discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any of the president, the ayes have it, the motion passes unanimously. That brings us to update on the equip applications.
The approval of the contract.
The approval of the contract. Do I have a contract for that?
There's various documents, but I put a summary in the board packet. Not like,
If you would, please, would you, please update us on what we need to do there?
Yeah.
This printer. I apologize for being less prepared for that, as it should be. Thank you for helping us out.
Also to clarify, the board did give signature authority to Josh and myself for these contracts to proceed. This was just an update for me to really give you guys information about what the contract entails and what we're getting into. So we wanted to run it by the board and, request your guys' blessing on this. So in your board packet, there should be a pretty lengthy document there. There's other documents and attachments that follow, but this is the most relevant information. So what this project is for phases 2 and 3 of the Rincon lateral piping project. We're doing phase 1 construction this fall with the BOR and NIFWIF. We should be receiving our notice to proceed on that relatively soon, as we're just now getting through compliance. But this contract for phases 2 through 4 is for approximately $1.5 million. I'm going to go ahead and summarize on the first page of that PDF 1 through 3 for you, and then I'll summarize the remaining appendices for you guys.
Thank you.
The purpose of the contract is the participants enter into this contract with NRCS to implement and or maintain specific conservation practices. These practices are defined by the conservation plan, scheduled operations, and mapped out accordingly. There's a reference document. It's NRCS CPA 1155. I can send that to you guys if you guys want to review that. In exchange, NRCS will make payments to the participants in the amounts listed in the schedule according to the terms of the contract appendix. Participant agreements, or our obligation, is to implement and maintain all conservation practices for the entire life of the agreement, which is for 2 years, in compliance with the approved plan and NRCS standards. If the participant violates material terms of the agreement, they may have to forfeit future payments and refund previous payments as determined by NRCS, or accept a payment reduction if NRCS decides the violation isn't severe enough to cancel the contract. the third, under 3C, if land under the contract is transferred to somebody else, a non-participant, we don't foresee that happening. All rights to future payments under this contract are forfeited. A participant must repay the United States for payments already received as determined by NRCS. In summary, you're agreeing to install and maintain conservation practices as planned. You may lose payments and owe funds if you violate the agreement or transfer the land. All official documents are part of the binding contract. And those official documents are what we'll review and sign to be awarded this money. So in the lengthy following pages, I don't know how many it is, I'm gonna just summarize kind of what we're bound to for that. So the participant agrees to enroll land in the program for the contract period, starting from NRCS's execution date, follow all terms and conditions of the contract, establish, maintain, and replace conservation practices as listed in the required forms, start at least one conservation practice within 12 months unless NRCS grants an extension due to uncontrollable circumstances. And so this project has head wall structures and the pipeline structure. So as long as we do one structure in place to completion, we're in compliance within the first year. Follow all technical standards and plans for installing practices, obtain all necessary legal permits, such as permits, easements, so on and so forth, for implementing practices, stop work and notify NRCS of encountering unexpected endangered species or cultural/historical sites, avoid any actions that would undermine the purpose of the contract, do not begin any conservation practice before the contract execution unless NRCS grants you a waiver, submit additional payment eligibility forms required by NRCS, retain all records for 3 years post-contract and allow NRCS or auditors to inspect them, allow NRCS access for land monitoring with prior notice, and lastly, treat NRCS staff respectfully and ensure their safety during site visits. So that pretty much wraps it up. There is one thing I will mention about this contract. It is essentially cost match. So the district will be on the hook for some level of funding. I believe it's about a 50-50 cost match is how it shakes out. Essentially what they're doing is they're paying a partial payment for the supplies and equipment for the project to install the project. They are not reimbursing us for labor, and the other portion of the piece the district will be responsible for. However, we can pair that funding with state funding, and that's the district's plan, is to look for additional ways to kind of partner that funding with to get the project done at no cost to the district. So.
Very good. Do in-kind services count as part of our cost?
No, because it's not quite cost match. They're just essentially discounting our material costs is the way to think about that. They're paying a portion of the cost of materials.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Franco? Hearing none, thank you very much. Appreciate the update.
And I would just like for the board to approve us moving forward with this.
What specifically are you asking for the board to approve?
To approve signature by myself to move forward with this contract.
What is the will of the board?
You want to delegate signature authority to Mr. Franzoli, sign this contract.
Second.
I have a motion from Director Rosa, seconded by Director Clay Schultz, to delegate signatory authority to the EQIP application contract. Discussion. Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Opinion of the president, the ayes have it. The motion passes unanimously. Brings us to the manager's update. Mr. Smith.
Right, we are in the throes of budget preparation for next year, so we will be asking the budget committee schedule a meeting probably next week to get started with that. Joa has met with all of our departments. I've sent with Joa and all of our department heads to set the budget, potential budget for next year, so we need to get started on that. We are beginning construction and maintenance, setting those priorities and looking at construction projects. talk about some of our funding has been held up and what we had planned on doing early this fall being delayed, so we're in throes of maintenance and preparing all the things that have been identified post irrigation season. I spent 10 days in Milwaukee and Utah at the end of July, early August. I attended the NACD conference in Milwaukee. Kind of the hot topic there was the restructuring of USDA, moving much of USDA's personnel out of Washington DC into 6 satellite offices. The closest office to us will be Fort Collins, Colorado. The other one in the west will be Salt Lake. I think Dallas is also on the table. No changes apparently to New Mexico, NRCS or FSA structure. It's all at the national level. Had dinner with the new NRCS chief, Aubrey Betancourt. She's a farmer from Southern California, very familiar with Western water issues, very familiar with the Elephant Irrigation District and project. I don't know what in her past she worked on the transfer of title at some point in time, but she knows all about us. So, good conversation, and we'll build on that relationship. I went to the NWRA Western Water Conference in Utah. Again, one of the hot topics there is kind of how everything is being restructured. Spent a lot of time talking about the Colorado River Basin, which doesn't really pertain to us, but it's interesting. On Dr. King and DL's conversation, one of the presentations, probably the most pertinent presentation for me, they spent a lot of time talking about SNOWTEL and contractors that are providing the scientific data for snow water equivalent. And there's a big push in the upper watersheds in Utah for soil monitoring. So everywhere USGS and NRCS has precipitation gauges and snow pads, they're also installing soil monitors at 3 different levels, which is helping calculate that loss as it comes down the river. So the annual NWRA meeting will be held November 5th through the 7th in Tucson. Have some board members plan to attend that. We are in the process of consolidating and tracking down all of our existing contracts, MOUs, MOAs, things that may expire and or need to be renewed, and put them in one central database so that we can keep track of those. James and Joe are working on a program that is going to track those automatically, email us when making new. On the Kinder Morgan matter, they have begun air sparging, pumping air, drilled wells, pumping air into the ground. I believe they're supposed to be done with that by the end of August. I haven't been down there to see what's going on yet, so. As far as my report, that is about all I have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. Mr. Hernandez, I'll let you know, we can see your chandelier. I don't know if that was intentional. Questions for Mr. Smith on the manager's update? Director Clay.
I noticed we're testing and interviewing for ditch writer positions. In view of what Dr. King told us, we'll need to do that, right?
Yes. We're not gonna be running water, we're gonna be doing construction.
Thank you, Director Clay. Other questions for Mr. Smith? Director Garai.
How's that air spark coming? I don't know. I'm interested to go see how that's going. We got a report from them that they have begun. That's about the extent of it.
Thank you, Director Garai. Other questions for Mr. Smith? Would you state the dates again for NWRA? Remember? We can send it in. I didn't see it in the
It's
calendar.
not in the calendar, so it's November 5th through the 7th,
And the location is,
Tucson.
okay,
And we'll put that on the agenda next month for travel.
very good. Mr. Smith has been extraordinarily busy since our last board meeting. I want to express my appreciation for the amount of time he has spent away from his family, the extra hours he has spent, while at the same time trying to juggle the day-to-day management of the district. Workload has been exceptionally high. and I'm grateful for your efforts. Brings us to the calendar of events. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next week, Monday and Tuesday, the Water and Natural Resources Interim Committee will be here in Las Cruces. I've been asked to speak on a panel, believe it's now Tuesday morning, like 10:45. Regarding the Lower Rio Grande, Hannah Risley White from the ISC, Adrian Whitmer, myself. I'm not sure who else. That's it. Okay. And then I also got an email asking me to serve on a panel on Monday afternoon. I may ask one of you all to fill that slot rather than me. They're looking for a farmer perspective on drought and how it's affecting operations in the Lower Rio Grande. So if you all have time, that will be at the Fulton Center at MSU. What was the date again? Monday and Tuesday. This is gonna be, yeah, 18th and 19th. Next item on the calendar is a special board meeting on August 21st at 1 p.m. Please put that on your calendars. Marilyn will be sending you reminders. We will need you in attendance for that. The next item is the New Mexico Water Law Conference, which will be held in Santa Fe, September 11th through the 12th. We have already approved travel for myself and 4 board members. You need to determine who, if anyone, is planning to attend so that we can get that arranged. The Coalition of Rio Grande Water Users Conference will be September 30th through October 2nd in Santa Fe. This conflicts with a hearing in the Texas versus New Mexico matter in Philadelphia. So we need to determine who's going to divide and conquer. And we need to approve travel for that conference. And then the Weary Annual Conference, I attended that last year in, where was that? Milwaukee, Suke. This year it's in Las Cruces, so we will plan on attending that if there are board members who are available. They have an interesting range of speakers at that conference. And then finally, this is just a forewarning, save the date. This year is an election year. The board election will occur in December. If you all have any questions, I have the election cheat sheet with the dates that petitions need to be filed, and we need to get that process started. So we do need approval of travel for the Coalition of Rio Grande Water Users Conference, September 30th through October 2nd. If anyone will be attending that.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. All right, taking those in order, we have the New Mexico Water Law Conference, September 11th through 12th. We have approved travel for up to 4 board members. Mr. Rosa, I believe you will be attending because you are presenting.
This is the water law conference, right?
Correct, September 11th through 12th.
Yes, correct.
So Director Rosa will be attending. It is my intention to attend. That said, if there are 3 other board members that would like to go to that instead, I will step aside and allow them to go. Who is interested in attending that conference?
Mr. President, where was that again?
It's in Albuquerque. No, excuse me, it's in Santa Fe. All right, not hearing anybody jumping up and down. At this time, the 2 attending are myself and Director Rosa. You have travel around that? Okay, we may travel together.
Mr. President, what's the date of our September BOD meeting? The 10th, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Yeah. Somebody wants to attend that. I'm gonna set a deadline of Friday. Is that sufficient, Mr. Smith?
This Friday?
Yeah.
That's plenty of time.
Please let Mr. Smith know by Friday if you wish to attend that conference. There are 2 other board members that can attend. That brings us to the Coalition of Rio Grande Water Users Conference, September 30th through October 2nd, and we don't have it on the calendar of events, but we also have the hearing in Texas, New Mexico, and Philadelphia on those same dates. Mr. Smith, do you remember the exact date that the hearing is ordered to begin?
We're to begin the 30th
Okay,
or 2 days, reserving the third day.
right. Let's start with, we need to approve travel. We have not approved travel yet for hearing, or have we?
You approve travel for the hearing? No?
All right. We need to approve travel to the hearing. Folks that will definitely need to attend, are Dr. King, Mr. Sanders, and Mr. Domenici. Mr. Smith. Are you planning to attend the hearing in Philadelphia?
I am.
Do you have any other staff members that need to attend with you?
I don't believe so.
All right, so we also have the manager, and then we should have some amount of governance there. As the chair of the legal review committee, I should attend, so I will willingly go to Philadelphia the end of September. What is the will of the board in terms of approving travel and how many board members you want to send? Director Rosa?
I think we should have up to 4 board members. I don't think we'll find that many.
I do not think it's a bad idea. So in the idea of the world is run by those who show up, it is important, in my opinion, that the special master sees that the governors of our district are engaged, that we are willing to do what is necessary to travel, to attend, to participate in these processes. Your voice is heard and is much more influential when they see you and they don't just see your legal counsel. What is the will of the board?
I move to approve travel for. How many staff was it for?
Yeah, so
We don't approve consultants.
we do have to approve the travel for them, I do believe. Is that correct, Mr. Franzoy? We have to approve the travel expenditure.
Okay, so for 3 consultants, 1 staff member, and up to 4 board members,
I have a motion.
all actual expenses.
I have a motion from Director Roby Rosa to approve travel for 3 consultants, the manager, 4 board members, for all actual expenses incurred for the hearing in Philadelphia.
Second.
Seconded by Director Ludwig. Discussion. Hearing no discussions closed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Being present, the ayes have it, the motion passed unanimously. So that brings us to the Coalition of Rio Grande Water Users Conference. Mr. Smith, do you have any staff members that you wish to send to that?
I think it would be beneficial to send someone. Mr. Franzoy is unfortunately unavailable that week. I haven't talked to Marilyn. It might not be a bad idea to send her. Or someone else on staff. Yeah. And if possible, it would also be good to have board representation there.
So 1 staff member is all you're requesting, Mr. Smith?
Let's request up to 2.
Thank you. So Mr. Smith has recommended approving up to 2 staff members. What is the will of the board in attending this?
If I may,
Please, Mr. Smith.
I have attended several conferences, not a lot of them over the past year, but I think that was one of the most beneficial. Because it is specific to the Rio Grande. Talks about the issues that actually affect us. If you have the opportunity to go, I recommend it.
I concur with that. You're going to meet people that are involved in water management, who have a different perspective than you do. And it is very valuable to network them, to hear what solutions they've come up with and try to understand how we can guide our district, in prosperous ways into the future.
When and where is that?
It is in Santa Fe, September 30th through October 2nd. Director Roverosa.
I concur with, Mr. Smith. This is the most pertinent conference that exists in the schedule of conferences. Everything has to do with us. And I strongly recommend that at least 2 board members go. So I move to approve travel for up to 2 staff and up to 2 board members.
So I have a motion from Director Roverosa, seconded by Director Colquitt to approve travel to the Coalition of Rio Grande Water Users Conference for 2 staff members and 2 board members for all actual expenses. Discussion. Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Being present, the ayes have it, the motion passes. I believe that is all the travel requests.
Mr. President,
Director Clayshaw.
I don't think we approved travel for the New Mexico Water Law Conference.
That had been approved at a previous board meeting.
Thank you, sir.
We just needed to identify the board members attending. Thank you.
That is all.
So we have to save the date for the EBID board election. Mr. Smith, I would request, if possible, given our workload, that we have the nomination process in place by our next board meeting. So that both the current board members that are choosing to run for re-election, as well as members of the public, can receive nominating petitions and begin the process of completing those and returning them to the district.
So we will begin the notice of election process. This is my cheat sheet,
It's good.
mid-September. Fair petitions. So yeah,
I think that.
that shouldn't be a problem, right?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Smith. So to our members, again, the world is run by those who show up. I am a strong proponent of having candidates. If you like your director, that is not a reason not to run for election. People will show up to vote when there are more than one candidate on the ballot. That is the best way for our members to express their will to this board. So I encourage our members to participate in the election process and to run for office. I encourage our board members, if you can, find someone in your district to run against you. I encourage that. And also run for office. I appreciate it. I'm grateful for it. I cannot express how grateful I am for your service on this, this Board of Governors. Brings us to HR safety update. I have Ms. Maciel on this.
So
I'm here.
available?
I am here.
You have the floor.
Well, just wanted to go over, we are at a current count of 80 employees. We are looking for ditch riders only to backfill positions that have been moved to other departments. We currently have 1 in the central, 2 in the north, and 2 in the south that we do need to get filled, and we're in the process of interviewing for those positions. Other than that, we have our upcoming Labor Day holiday. On Monday, September 1st, the office will be closed that day. Other than that, not much else is going on. Any questions?
Questions for Mrs. Maciel? Hearing none, thank you.
You're
That brings us to engineering and maintenance, Mr. Rubio.
Good morning. For updates on engineering department, we purchased a drone with LiDAR attachment, new camera. We procured the drone, we did training. We did do drone flights after the flooding in Valos. We went out to the dams that contain water between those sites. We did north area dam inspections, finishing up some estimates for some grant funding this month. Infrastructure data collection and log book for lifespans of turnouts, check structures and such that we can keep up with all those. See what ones we have to replace soon and create a plan for the next 5 years. We have an intern in our department at the moment for designs. We've been helping him along. He's with Vermont Community College. And we've been preparing for work at the Erode Dam, doing inspections, checking as builds and scheduling drone flights. So quite a month.
Thank you, Mr. Rubio. Mr. Rubio, would you please tell the board the benefits of the LiDAR detector and what you're using it for?
Yes, sir. So the LiDAR detector emits essentially a laser to the surface of the flight path, reflects back to the drone. We then, for example, if we flew over Stallman's, we can take the surface that we're flying over and the trees would be on a separate layer. We remove that and we can achieve our surface for projects. So we use that for elevations. That helps us essentially, contours, pull our contours and such.
And you mentioned using it during the flooding event at the flood control dams.
Correct.
So how beneficial there?
We actually didn't use the LiDAR there, but we flew the drone with the new camera. And we took some great photos of the structure, the elevations. We could see exactly where the water levels were and how they were dropping. We took a couple flights and we were able to gauge how much seepage and how much flow was coming through.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rubio. Questions on the engineering maintenance update? Thank you. That brings us to committee reports. Land use, Director Colquitt.
I'd like to start off by thanking everyone in the land use committee. We met quite a few times virtually, but David was very instrumental. Zach Livin was very instrumental. Hell, really everyone. Scott Gamboa joined us. Alex Rubio joined us. I'm actually just gonna pass it over to David. Will you take over? Of course. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Lutz.
The land use committee met 4 times, between the last meeting and this meeting. One of those times was just to reschedule. So there were 3 substantive meetings. On July 10th, we met, with the committee with, the treasurer manager, Josh Smith, Mr. Rubio, Mr. Gamboa joined us. We talked about the right of use policy, its background, starting in the 90s. Talked about, what kind of possible amendments might exist. We agreed that we would benefit from Zach Livin's input, so we tried to schedule a follow-up meeting. The first time we scheduled it, he was doing a tour of the bio area. We did reschedule. We had him available on July 30th. We specifically talked a lot about utility placements near drains, specifically sewers. His feeling as to the background, kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly, what's worked, where we've had problems. One example being the Leesburg spill last year. The committee discussed whether there should be any kind of amendment to the policy just to have some kind of outright ban on, for example, having sewer lines
The committee's recommendation was not to suggest such an amendment, to continue considering it on a case-by-case basis. There was discussion that one aspect of the right of use policy that did not exist was how to handle variance requests. And the committee tasked me with creating some language to consider at our final meeting before this board meeting. We had that meeting. I presented that. I also presented amendments to the land relinquishment policy that we've also been working on. Those substantive items are laid out in the committee report, but I believe we'll also be discussing those in the items themselves. Beyond that, we did not have time to work on the city of Las Cruces MOU, which was tasked with the committee. But the two items we looked at the most in those 4 meetings are set as agenda items.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lutz. Director Colvin.
Let's see.
Okay, so I guess we'll move on to 1997 ENG 10, the relinquishment.
Very good.
Does that work? Right.
Mr. Smith, I have that for you and Mr. Lutz.
I will defer to Mr. Lutz.
Mr. Chair, at our last meeting, the board tasked us with looking at a number of specific changes to the amendments we had proposed. We have a new red line version that the recommendation of the land use committee is to approve. The additions specifically, Mr. Esslinger on the first page brought up that we might want to make it more clear in the definition that this does not involve water rights. So we added a sentence to make that more clear. I thought that was a very good suggestion. On section B for initial consideration, we've tried to lay out more clearly that if someone is interested in purchasing any kind of property interest, they would come to staff with a letter of interest. Staff would review it to make sure it meets the basic requirements of something that arguably the board would consider. In other words, to screen out something that's just would never be approved. And then if it's something that arguably the board would consider at that time, they would pay the application fee. It would be presented to the board for initial consideration. We added criteria, kind of taking it from the initial policy statement. I believe, Mr. Chair, that was, or Mr. President, that was something specifically you asked us to do. So we added that language. The procedure for easement sections also included that criteria for decision. We also made the application fee for an easement consistent with the change that is proposed for property interests as a whole. They would both be $1,000 application fee. We added a proposed current minimum sales price of $18,565 per acre. That was a figure that was included in prior drafts of the amendment. It derives from an appraisal and consultation with El Paso, where that figure came. There was a great deal of discussion in the land use committee about you can never have a price that fits all aspects of property interest. You have to have something that it may not fit every situation, but it's just a baseline. And the feeling was that that would screen out unreasonably low requests if someone was trying to buy something at a price that was just too cheap for EBID to really want to contemplate. Finally, there was an added bullet point on Exhibit A. This was something Vice President Rosa raised to look at it generally, but he brought up a specific point about what if someone came and wanted to buy this building? And that was a gap in terms of sort of physical property that the district owns. So we created a bullet point that we felt encompassed that. as being a definition of something that would not be excess real property. Those are the suggested changes that come out of land use committee. The recommendation of the committee is to approve.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lutz. Questions on the proposed amendments to the relinquishment policy? Director Sloan?
And I don't think I read it in there, but I was just, this is just more of a question or a thought. If, would anybody that wanted to purchase a property, in my opinion, they need to own a property touching that property. Correct.
Oh,
I don't know if that, I didn't read that in there, but that was just something I thought about that, you know, I'll give an example. I don't necessarily know that Raphael wants somebody else to come buy a drain ditch in the middle of his farm.
I would say that is not a hard and fast requirement of this policy. I think that would be something that the board would consider as to whether in the initial consideration process, they would even want to consider it.
Is that something we should add in there just as a, you know, I know EBID owns a lot of little weird properties. They're all little quarter acre lots and weird little things.
Mr. Smith?
I don't know that we want to limit it to that extent because there are properties that could be purchased by people or entities who do not own anything around it. Like if you're talking purely drains and canals, maybe that's a requirement we could include, but there are odd pieces that the town of Mesilla has expressed interest in that they don't own property surrounding. That I would have no issue if they wanted to purchase that.
Should the adjacent property owner have right of first refusal?
There you No.
There's an opinion. What is your opinion, Mr. Clayshell?
I'm posing a question. I'm not sure I
Okay.
have an opinion.
Very good. Mr. Franzoy?
David, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't that policy drafted that anything that was a functioning piece for the district cannot be relinquished? Yes, therefore, a drain on Raphael's property most likely is gonna be utilized by the district, therefore that will not be up for sale.
Yeah, that was more just like an example, but. I just know EBID has lots of weird little parcels. So.
And can I qualify?
Mr. Lutz?
One thing, to Mr. Sloan, on easements. I believe easements can only be brought by the person who owns the property next to it. Okay.
Now, is
So
it in our policy or as a legal basis?
in the procedure for easements, it indicates the applicant shall be only the servient estate landowner. And said landowner shall agree in writing to the terms of this policy. So if someone is trying to buy an easement over EBID property, they have to own the property next door.
That's what servient estate means?
Yes,
Thank you.
so I apologize.
No.
But if they want to buy a piece of property outright, there's no such limitation.
Director Roverosa?
So I want to avoid everybody trying to. I want to avoid people being concerned with having to acquire a piece of land they're interested in. And thinking that they have to do it right away, because if they don't do it first, then they won't get the chance to do it and somebody else will do it. Without their knowledge. So I believe that we need to add a notice process. And if there is additional interest, then we need to have a procedure for how we determine who to sell that property to, be it an auction or some other method. I also, to Mr. Sloan's point, I don't want to have a piece of land that is, say, right next door to a farmer. That farmer expressed interest, and then we have interest expressed from another party that is not adjacent to that piece of land. It comes in and buys it for an exorbitant amount that the farmer cannot compete with.
Good point.
So. Yeah, we don't want a data center to be put up on EBID land. That's just gonna.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe we do, maybe we don't, yeah,
I have a question.
Yeah.
How do you do that from legal standpoint? Isn't that discriminating? Yeah, I don't think you can. I think DFA requires that we sell it at the highest value. Is that right, Karen?
But you could do a negotiated sale, which is not necessarily the highest. But
Has to
they
be
want to
fair
make sure
market
you're
value.
not
Yeah.
giving the rate.
Fair market value above the threshold of our gave.
these are points well taken. I want to organize our discussion a little bit. To organize our discussion, I'm gonna ask for. Is there a motion to approve the amendments to the relinquishment policy?
I'm not ready to approve, but I will move to approve them.
I have a motion from Director Roverosa, seconded by Director Tharp to approve the amendments to policy 1997-ENG 10, the relinquishment of EBID property interests. We're now open for discussion. And to help organize the discussion, is there any opposition to any of the amendments that were proposed? I would like to discuss those first. I'm not hearing any. I have a question on the initial consideration on B1, which is essentially what I'm going to call staff screening. Mr. Smith or Mr. Lutz, if staff says no, what, if any, is the appeal process for the applicant, for the person who has expressed interest?
And I'm just thinking, Mr. Chair,
Mr. Lee?
you know, this policy did not have any kind of stated appeal process. You know, I think the option at that point would be to approach their director, potentially have something placed to where they could address the board. The process of just coming to a board meeting and asking to be heard.
Thank you. And so be sure that you're talking through that. We have a process for any member of the public to get an agended item. Can they legally come and discuss a potential request for approval? Is that, but I just want to be sure that somehow we're not. I don't know what all the various legal traps there. Mr. Smith.
So. Kind of the way I look at it is we're trying to prevent. Non-client, basically. Attempts to purchase property that are never going to be approved. To stop those at the staff level. And I don't know that giving people the ability to appeal our decision is necessarily a good idea, because it defeats the purpose. Unless, I mean, there will be people who say, oh, okay, thanks, and walk away, or there will be people who bring those requests before the board, which is the reason we have that paragraph in the first place, is to prevent those people from coming before the board. So I don't know. Like I said, we talked at the last meeting. I think staff has a much better idea about what property is necessary, and what property may be excess than the board does. I don't know that we need an appeal. Do we?
The use of the term arguably, in writing the amendment was the idea that staff, even if they didn't agree it was something that the board would consider excess real property, or the board would be interested, would err on the side of presenting it to the board. The idea is to screen out stuff that just seems like it would never have a chance. You know,
I mean, there's 650 miles of facilities. 600 of those are never, are out of the question. So if someone comes in and says, I want to buy, a mile to Leesburg Canal, we say no, and there's no appeal. There's no question. Now a drain that is dead and has been pieced out already. That's again, though, that's a decision that needs to be made. I don't know. I mean, that's up to the board. If you all wanna field appeals from decisions by staff, that's your prerogative, yeah.
You could add language to that effect. I think if someone, absent having that language just came to the board, I think generally, from my experience, they just come. The board listens and says, thank you. I don't think it's something they can act on without it being agendaed as to a specific action item. That's been my experience over the last year.
Thank you, I appreciate that. To be clear, no, I'm not looking. I'm not looking to add more processes for this body. I am. I'm also cautious about releasing authority that should be retained by the board. I like the idea of screening it at the staff level. It does help to take care of the issue of, just, hey, I'm interested in this. I'm sure you are. The answer is no. And it just ends. The applicant doesn't have to pay a fee. There's no staff work to present for the board. These are all things that are beneficial. And if Mr. Lutz, it's in your opinion that the informal way that members of the public can approach the board and present a concern, and then the board can choose the direct action. If they so choose, if that's sufficient, then I appreciate the consideration. Mr. Francois.
One other thing to James' comment that I should have said earlier is applicants can speak in opposition of any permit or disposition sale at a board meeting. Meaning, in your scenario, Rafa could come in and speak in opposition of that project being, disposed of by EBID. It's a good point.
Are there any other questions or concerns about the proposed amendments? Hearing none, that brings us to the question that was posed by Mr. Sloan about potentially having a requirement that sales require the applicant to have a servient estate. Did I state that right, Mr. Lutz?
Servient or adjoining.
An adjoining property interest. I considered this as well. In general, if the adjoining landowner opposes it, that has been impactful to the district. The district has been reticent to relinquish property to interests other than adjoining property interests. I think Mr. Franzoi's point is well taken. Director Rosa added a question about notice, and I'm wondering if that is a necessary component of this, and if that would resolve this. So when there are property interests at stake at the county and the city level, they have noticing requirements for landowners within a certain distance of the proposed action. It is cumbersome. That is not a simple thing to do.
Where would it be published?
So they're generally sent.
The legals.
They're mailed out.
Oh, yeah, they're generally mailed to the property owners, probably via certified mail. I'm not sure what the standard is for the process, but you get them in the mail. Mr. Lutz.
And Mr. President, Director Rosa did approach me a couple days ago to think about this issue just individually. I didn't present that because I was presenting what was in the packet. That doesn't mean I was being critical of that in any way. But he asked me to think of some ideas of how that might be included. And what I'd say is
some regulations on the state level, require publication in the newspaper. One idea I had that I wrote back to Director Roby Rosa was you could publish on the EBID website. Basically say this application has been presented for a period of time. Or as indicated, direct notice by mail to certain affected landowners. Are all potential options that there are examples of easily that could be included in terms of language and submit.
Director Rosa.
I like the idea of directly addressing our constituents that may be affected within a certain distance from the property in question. I don't know how cumbersome that is. I don't think it is cumbersome as the city or the county having to do it for every single person that owns land in that area. I think we need to be sure that our constituents do not feel like land was sold out from under them without them even being aware that it was for sale.
Thank you, that's a point well taken. Before I ask for other comments from the board on that, Director Rosa, is that an amendment you think is necessary to move forward today with the amendments proposed? Or is that something that could be considered at a future time by the land use committee?
I think we could consider it a future time, but I don't want to, I'm not sure if we can go out of order, but I don't want to raise the moratorium without something like that. So we could have approved this, but I would not be ready to raise the moratorium.
Okay,
Lift the moratorium.
Make one last comment. So,
Mr. Brunswick.
so the district, in terms of how cumbersome that process could be, I think, our push over the next 2 years is to get all constituents' contact information, email lists. And so, this serves in conjunction with that. I think that would make it significantly less cumbersome. But it will be EBID's mission and direction to get the email listings from landowners and constituents.
Mr. Smith.
So I don't disagree. I think a notice requirement for any contiguous land is relatively simple. So if a piece of property is being sold, the neighboring constituents anyway could be notified. I mean, that's not burdensome, but I would say that needs to occur at the point that it has already been determined that this is a valid
I agree.
proposal. And as it comes before the board, notify those that it's coming before the board.
So, Mr. Smith, if I understand what your suggestion on the notice requirement is, in the initial consideration, first staff has a screening process. And at that point, they take the application fee and initiate the notice process.
And notify anyone who owns land contiguous to the proposed purchase that this is occurring. We could do that at the same time as it comes to the board. Assuming they've paid their fee and tell us they want to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Sloan.
Kind of go along with that, so my only thought is, let's say there is a guy that applies, somebody else gets notified, they decide, we're both interested. How do we handle two parties that both have interest?
Best offer.
Well, I don't know, the question, I don't know how to.
Well, the first thing is the board would have to do the initial consideration about whether or not.
Let's assume we approve, let's assume it's a viable place of property that we would sell.
So that we have to be in the final consideration process.
Mr. Lutz also wrote some language on that.
Correct, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Lutz.
Director Roby Rosa asked me to look at if there were multiple people through the notice process that had an interest. What potential options might be available. Specifically, he asked about an auction procedure.
And I did prepare some language. It was a rough draft, as you probably saw. I think Director Robirosa is the only one that saw what I put together. I didn't want to create any kind of rolling form situation on that draft. But, one potential option would be is after you provided notice, if there are multiple individuals that have interest, we create some kind of auction scenario to determine who is going to present the most favorable price to this board.
Mr. Smith?
So when we're talking about real estate transactions, we deal with multiple offer transactions all the time. It's not terribly complicated. It's basically you submit your offer and we evaluate them, and then at some point you say, okay, we want your best and final offer. The issue that we have is a public entity. So all of those transactions are subject to all of DFA's approval, assuming that it's more than $25,000, and I'm pretty sure every transaction we consider will be. So, auctioning property, real property, I think is maybe not as simple as we think.
It would be.
Mr. Smith has the floor.
That's the issue. I mean, I think we can come up with a policy for multiple offers. How that's gonna be resolved, and if it's an auction, we just need to ensure that whatever we're doing. Because if we're selling real property in excess of $25,000, it has to be approved by DFA. And it has to meet fair market value. It requires appraisals. So we get in excess of fair market value, great. We want to pay more than fair market value. Thank you. If they want to pay less, it's not gonna happen, so.
Director Sloan?
I would be in favor of the auction, mainly just because if you did like some kind of sealed bid and one party lost, I would be worried about the staff responsibility of having anybody accusing anybody of leaking information to somebody else to, this guy bid 18,000, you bid 18,500, you're gonna get the property. If it's an auction, I think maybe it takes a little bit of.
Well, it's a sealed bid, you can't leak information because you open all the bids at that point in time, so there's no way to know what anybody bid on the project until they're all open.
Allegedly.
I mean, this is not gonna happen.
Mr. Lutz?
Mr. Chair, I think, auction is one way to look at it. Another way would say is after notice is provided, if the other party expresses interest, then they would need to set forth an application of their own. Then you could consider multiple applications at a board meeting where initial consideration is done. That might be a little more streamlined. If you did an auction type procedure, I think the only way to comply with the DFA requirements is, for example, if you did sealed bids and you got the highest bid and board said to move forward, they would still have to get the appraisal, still have to go through all that process. So you would have an auction and then they would be, it seems a little counterintuitive, but after they provide their price via the highest bid at the auction, they still have to do the appraisal, and the board has to then give final consideration after DFA has looked at it. So.
Thank you, Mr. Lutz. All right. The motion on the floor is to approve the proposed amendments to the policy. I'm assuming that for the two items that have been brought up, one of them being noticed and one of them being the resolution of competing offers. Or competing requests, I guess I would put it. I'm assuming we don't have language for those two things proposed today in an amendment. So given that those two items have been brought up, you don't have proposed language, what is, I guess the next question is there any further discussion? Director Clayshaw.
If we approve these, it does not remove the moratorium, correct?
This is a discrete item that is the approval of this policy. There is another agenda item on the moratorium.
Okay,
And
thank you.
And I appreciate Mr. Rosa's caution. We are not discussing the moratorium. Thank you.
Mr. President,
Mr. Rosa.
we do have some language that Mr. Luke's prepared, but I think that we still need to discuss more how we want to deal with multiple bidders. I don't know if we want to do it right now or if we want to get back to the committee.
That is up to this board. Mr. Slum,
I would move to postpone, 1997 ENG 10, for a further date. But really, that was back to committee.
I have a motion to postpone. Mr. Luke's help me out. Is that a motion to precedent? Give me just one moment, please. Mr. Smith.
President, Gary. In the last 40 years, have we ever had multiple offers on a piece of property?
No. Appreciate that.
Mr. President, a motion to postpone this debate.
Is it a motion of precedence though, so it can be brought up while we're in the middle of our item? I believe it is.
I believe it is, yes.
Okay, does it require a second?
Yes.
I have a motion to postpone from Director Sloan.
Wasn't there already a motion on the floor?
There is,
There
I
is.
believe this is a motion of precedence, and so it's allowed during that.
Second.
Seconded by Director Wright. All right, debate on postponing the approval of this item. Director Tharp.
Why are you wanting to postpone it? What is your concern? I think we need to address these issues we just discussed right now, actually from the agenda, everything all together. Right. That way we can proceed with moratorium. Correct. At the same time, correct. And it's just the verbiage, right, that we need to stand, I guess.
So, what's the reason, what's the reason for not being able to approve this now? And I don't want to speak for you. I think I know.
Mainly just the notice of people adjacent properties. And also just have it clear if there is two competing interests, how do we handle this thing? That's my concerns. Okay.
Thank you, Director Tharp. Other discussion? Mr. Smith.
Just one suggestion would be, let's look at the New Mexico Real Estate Commission, multiple offers, provisions. I think we can probably pull quite a bit of language from that. About how those are handled.
Mr. Lutz.
Mr. President, I did confirm that the motion for the home can take precedence. So we are working correctly into that structure. I did have some language to Director Rosa regarding auction that I pulled from the Mexico regulations. I can look at the multiple offer. If this is postponed, the one question I'd have, are we giving, in terms of coming back next month, are we giving notice to just joining constituents or any landowner?
Let me finish the motion to
Okay,
postpone
sorry.
first, and then we'll probably be referring back to my assumption is if it's postponed, it'll be referred back to committee with instructions.
I would, Mr. President, I would like to debate these issues a little bit more, just so that we give good direction to the committee.
Yeah.
The motion on the floor is postponed. That is the motion we are debating.
I would like,
Okay. Director Colquitt.
If I postpone and send back to committee,
The motion is just.
that's, oh, okay.
Okay, that, the referring back to committee, if it's postponed, we'll discuss how to then resolve this to the postponement.
What is the appropriate way to communicate that? I don't know about postponing, but we should debate all those items. Cause man, we got to all figure it out now.
Can we say that you oppose the motion to postpone?
I oppose the motion to postpone.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion to postpone? Okay. Director Tharp.
If we postpone, right after that, can we discuss this?
We can give direction to the committee, yes.
And that's ultimately what we're gonna do anyway.
Please, I believe that's correct. It's an agenda item.
can we oppose or turn down the motion to postpone, discuss, and then kick it back to committee. Yes.
That'd be the same thing. Or postpone, move to refer. Circles.
Yeah, all of these are okay. What I'm saying is if the motion to postpone fails, we'll discuss and you can then subsequently move to postpone again. If it passes, we can discuss the instructions we want to give. to committee. All of those are in order.
Yes.
Further discussion on the motion to postpone, those are all in order, all those questions. Hearing none. On the motion to postpone, all of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All of those opposed,
Wait, hey, Mr. President. We're voting on the motion to postpone.
that's correct.
I am in favor of that.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion to postpone, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Oh, I lost my secretary. She is taking something else. Mr. Smith, will you please call the roll?
This is painful.
Director Grine,
Aye.
Director Christ.
Aye.
Director Clark,
Nay.
Director Sloan.
Aye.
Director Roby Rosa. Director Clay.
Aye.
Director Colquitt.
Nay.
Director Ludwig.
Nay.
Aye. Aye, motion postponed passes. All right, so we are postponing this. I'm going to refer the item back to committee. You're welcome. What are the instructions of the committee? One of them that I have heard is that we want a notice provision after staff gives the initial consideration approval to the adjacent EBID landowners. Did I hear that correct?
That's correct.
So,
Let's boil that down. Just.
I believe there's notes being taken by Mr. Lutz.
Thank God. Chase. Mr. President,
Mr. Lutz?
is there any interest in a larger posting on the EBID website, for example?
Yes.
Mr. President.
All right, I hear you.
So-
Mr. Smith?
Would you look, yeah, if, I mean, I guess the intent is, do you wanna create massive interest and sell property at a huge profit and create bidding wars? Or are you simply trying to notify people that property adjoining their property may be sold to someone else?
I heard the latter from Director Ledger. So, I'm gonna ask the committee to consider both ways on that. Because I heard, conflicting opinions from the board, so consider both ways so that that can be resolved. When we consider the amendments. Director Clayshaw?
We are a public entity and I live in transparency. So my feeling is you notice everybody that has adjacent property, not just EBID members. That is my personal opinion.
Thank you. Would you please also consider that at the committee? Point well taken, Director Clayshaw. Other pieces of instruction on notice that we wish to the committee to consider?
Auction.
Director Roverosa?
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe we should consider whether to notice via mail or email. Or any other method.
So form. Other things you want the committee to consider with regards to notice? There was a request to consider, multiple requests. And the selection process for multiple requests. Reasonable description. Multiple offers. how we resolve that? What's the resolution for multiple people that want to acquire property that the board is approving for relinquishment?
Mr. President,
Mr. Lutz,
would a potential policy option leave it to board discretion? It could consider multiple offers just by virtue of offer presentation through multiple applications, or if the board decides it wants to have an auction, it could have an auction. I think that could be drafted up as alternatives for the board to consider on a case by case basis.
my only request is it is legal.
So.
Mr. Smith,
I don't want to say, I don't foresee, typically, we're not going to be advertising and marketing EBID land for sale. Maybe at some point in the future, the board decides we have excess property that we don't want, and we actually want to notify people that we are intending to sell property. But I think the way this is presented, this is constituents or neighboring landowners, whoever, coming to the board asking for the opportunity to purchase a piece of property. All right?
correct.
Okay.
That is at least how the process has been laid out. This is not a process for EBID is soliciting offers.
Do we want to address that? If we're gonna get in the weeds, let's take care of it.
What is the will of the board there? Is that something you want the committee to consider? Can you say that again? I didn't quite catch.
So the way this policy reads, it's a constituent or landowner or interested party coming to the board, coming to the district saying, I want to buy this portion. This specific piece of property, here's how much I'm willing to pay. Do we foresee an instance where the district says, we now have excess property that we want to dispose of, and we are going to market it? I mean, we could do that by listing property with a real estate broker, if that's what the board at some point in the future wanted to do, or we could simply notify people that we're entertaining offers on property. Is that something we even want to address?
I think we can address it when we find a piece of land that we decide we want to sell, but let's just keep it to,
At this time.
yeah, let's keep it to what we're.
With that person and be treating them at a disadvantage and be unfair to that individual to give a price proposition before other people get their price propositions too. So you would undermine the competitive bid process by making them bid first before opening it up to the public. So in that instance, they would not provide their, offer and or appraisal. So just keep that.
But you're,
So that,
Mr. Smith, you're talking about actively marketing property.
yeah, if you were to sell property, I think we would list it with an asking price that we have determined is at or above our market value. Sure, it's not really what we're talking about.
No, yeah, that's not what we're talking about. I think we should keep that separate. I think we should deal with that.
But to Joel's point, our requirement is you come in and tell us how much you're going to pay, and if somebody else decides they want to make an offer, you've already said your offer, and I don't know if that becomes publicly available. But maybe we don't require the amount they're willing to pay until we determine whether or not there are multiple offers.
Correct.
So
So in A, we would remove the price that they're willing to pay. That would move somewhere down the process, which is a problem in and of itself.
So I would ask the committee that is, I don't know what to call it, that's paragraph A1D. It discusses that the application has to include the per square foot price offered and the total upfront.
And David, real quick, what that would be is that minimum 18,500-ish. That would be EBID's minimum requirement, and you would have to exceed that value and just notify them that if you're not gonna exceed this value, you won't be considered, and that's how you could move forward with that.
Yeah, I mean, that would be part of the staff review.
Yeah, you're not getting their number from them, what they wanna pay, just letting them know that you would have to pay above this amount.
That's an excellent point. Thank you. Well taken, Mr. Francois. All right. I believe the answer from this board is we are not looking to add into this policy a process for EBID to list or solicit offers for property we wish to relinquish. That would be handled either in a separate policy or in some form of ad hoc resolution. Is there a different opinion? All right, hearing none, that's not something we need to consider. So we have the notice provision. We have the multiple offers provision. And included in that is the consideration of how to handle the offering price requirement of the application. Is there anything else we wish to have the committee consider? Director Colquitt, do you believe that you can consider those items and have a amended policy for the next regular board meeting?
1 month from today,
September 10th.
that'll work.
Thank you, Director Colquitt. So I'm going to refer that to committee and ask them to please have that prepared for our September 10th board meeting. I also want to state how much I appreciate the effort that the land use committee has been putting into this. These are hard problems to solve, which is why they haven't been solved yet. And I appreciate you running them to ground, how much effort it is to do that. Thank you. Any other discussion on the relinquishment policy? Hearing none, that brings us to the item of potential approval to lift the moratorium on land transfers, resolution 2025-11. Mr. Smith.
Mr. President, I would suggest we postpone that as well.
Mr. Smith suggests postponing that. So that is his presentation.
I move to postpone this to the September board meeting.
Second.
I have a motion from Director Rosa, seconded by Director Chris. To postpone the potential approval to lift the moratorium on land transfers, which is resolution 2025-11. Just to the September board meeting. What's the motion? Discussion on the motion to postpone. Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? In the opinion of the president, the ayes have it, motion passes unanimously. Item 18, discussion and approval of the right of use policy amendment procedure for variance requests. Mr. Smith.
I will defer to Mr.
Mr. Luce.
Mr. President, the land use committee over the course of the last month, as directed by this board, looked at the right of use policy, specifically as to requests related to utility lines. As I mentioned in the land use committee report, we solicited input from Mr. Rubio and Mr. Gamboa. I believe Mr. Caballero was also at one of our meetings. We also enlisted input from Zach Libben, our engineer on contract. There was discussion generally about utility lines, specifically about sewage lines. That the committee did not recommend proposing an amendment that outright banned them or required a 25-foot depth. I believe it's below the invert of the drain. Is that the correct technical?
I was 5 foot below the invert of the drain. In the example would be that that's 25 feet below the surface.
25 feet below the surface.
Yeah.
But there was one item that seemed to be a gap that in the time that we had would be addressed, is that there's no variance policy. Or there's no variance procedure within the policy as to how the board looks at someone that comes and says, we are presenting something, but we have to request that you vary your policy. Typically, you would see that particularly in zoning areas. I know you served on planning and zoning in the county, and I'm sure the county had specifics on that.
Definitely did.
So, I put together something, taking as the inspiration, zoning variance procedures and making it consistent with what seems to be the needs of this district. It requires specific findings from this board. It also is meant to be consistent with the exhibit that we're proposing as to the relinquish of land interest in terms of considering requests related to what might be excess real property. So the idea is to accommodate various goals the district might have. The goals of use of land so that society as a whole is benefiting from the land the district has, economic benefit district can receive. But on the flip side, not doing something that may be potentially dangerous to members of the district, members of the public, or otherwise detrimental to the EBID interests. So the bullet points in this very procedure are designed to try to have the board look at all those perspectives.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lutz. Questions from the board? Mr. Lutz, this is listed as Article 7, procedure for various requests. I don't have the full policy in front of me. Are there currently 6 articles?
Yes.
Thank you. So this would be an additional article in terms of how the policy is structured. I want to note that I appreciate the enumeration of the findings that this board shall determine in granting a variance. It is my opinion that variances should be hard to grant. There should be a necessity to grant this variance in order to prevent all reasonable use of whatever it is that the use request is. That said, that can occur. There can be very unique items to a specific piece of property that a permitted use is being considered for. The criterion for determining it, I think are appropriate. Those are my comments. I support the amendment.
I move to approve the amendment to EBID right of use and license policy as proposed by Blaine.
I have a motion from Director Rosa to approve the amendment to the EBID right of use and license policy, specifically the procedure for variance requests. Seconded by Director Tharp. Discussion. Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor of the proposed amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Opinion of the president, the ayes have it. The motion passes unanimously. The policy is amended. That brings us to the status of intergovernment MOUs. That is an item for Mr. Smith. And I'm going to ask us to take a 5-minute recess prior to that. So without opposition from the board, we're in recess for 5 minutes. Madam Secretary, please mute the audio. We are back in order. We're on agenda item number 19, the status of intergovernmental MOUs. Mr. Smith.
Again, I will refer to Mr. Lutz, but really quickly, like I said, we are in the process of trying to organize all of our existing agreements. And looking at agreements that we're gonna need going into the future, so for that.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Lutz.
Yes, Mr. President, we are looking as Treasurer Manager Smith said, at organizing all our various agreements. There are a number of them at various stages. We talked last month about City of Las Cruces, that's already before Land Use Committee. We have the gas blanket agreement, a little bit different in terms of the type of agreement it is, but Caballo Soil and Water District, there's an MOU with ISC that has expired that we are looking at reigniting. But also Doñana County and Sierra County in terms of overall having some kind of agreement in place as to the various property interests, looking at concerns over trespass over the years. I have reached out. I know Sierra County is not as significant in terms of the land volume, but I have actually spoken to their county attorney and they are interested in working with us. And in Doñana County, we have a preliminary draft that we're looking at. The reason I asked and have this on the agenda is if I prepared something and I had talked to the counterparty about it, but it had not gone through a committee process, my prediction would be that there might be interest in this board of having a committee such as the Land Use Committee looking at it. And I thought I might be able to save a potential month by just asking if those are the kinds of items that could be referred to committee now, so that the first time you see a potential final draft, it's already been by committee.
Thank you, Mr. Lutz. I would agree that the MOUs that I have seen predominantly deal with land use. There are some that have some other issues that might be better suited to another committee, but certainly the ones that have come up recently are definitely land use. So, Director Colquitt, what is the capacity of the Land Use Committee to be able to consider these MOUs? So,
I aim to please.
well, I appreciate that.
No, I mean,
I-
if it needs to be done, put it on, but it might, that might come second to the other things we have going on right now, but sure,
Very good. So,
pack it in.
Mr. Lutz, you may refer any of the MOUs that come up that are appropriate to go to the Land Use Committee to that committee for discussion and then with the recommendation to come to the board.
Thank you. And I will work with Director Colvin and the committee on the ones that, just internally add the greatest time pressure requirement in terms of order. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lutz. Mr. Smith, did you have any follow-up on that? Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry.
Yes, there are two IBWC MOUs that are coming up. They're either expired or they're coming up to their expiration date. And certainly I'm researching those that are not land use issues, but they should be looked at by the committee, one committee or another.
Our recollection is those deal with water. Is that correct?
One deals with the river management plan, which is a habitat MOU. And the other one is on the flood control gates that we operate for for IBWC.
And Mr. President,
Mr. Lutz?
I think I misspoke. I think I said ISC, I meant IBWC.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Lutz, Mr. Colquitt, what I'm going to ask is that if you have an MOU that does not fit into the scope of the Land Use Committee, potentially these two IBWC ones are outside of the scope of the Land Use Committee, to report that back to the board, and they will be assigned to whatever committee is appropriate. I think those might be water resources. Might be legal review as well, yeah.
Run that back through Josh.
I No, I probably should not have a committee report to Josh.
Okay,
It probably is appropriate for the committee chair to report back to the board.
okay.
Anything else on the status of the intergovernmental MOUs? Thank you, Mr. Esslinger. That brings us to Board Rules and Ethics Committee. We had a committee meeting August 5th. The subject was discussed a board member that didn't attend the professionalism and harassment training. The committee discussed and did not believe that that there was an implication of a code of conduct violation. And the committee directed legal counsel to discuss with treasurer manager options to have the board member attend equivalent training as well as to explore the cost options related to such individual training. That is the report of the committee. Any questions? Hearing none, that brings us to the consent agenda. Do we have anything on the consent agenda other than licenses? I believe we do. Okay, so given that, Mr. Gamboa, I believe we need to pull item 1, which is LCL Holdings, LLC and THARP. In fact, I know we do because I've got at least one recusal. So for licenses 2 through 25, is there a request from the board to pull any of those from the consent agenda? Hearing none, we pulled item 1, so what is the will of the board on the remaining consent agenda?
Move to approve the remaining consent agenda.
Second motion.
I have a motion from Director Roby Rosa, seconded by Director Garai to approve the remaining consent agenda. Any discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Opinion of the president, the ayes have it, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
So that brings us to item 1, which is license 2025-L-093. Mr. Gamboa.
Yes, so this license here, like you mentioned, it's our second review of this license, so it's gonna be for the force main pipeline paralleling the outside right bank of the sea drain. And again, this will be our second review, the land use committee, Mr. Roots and all, we had discussions over this, I'd like to just turn it over to you guys to see how you wanna.
Are you able to bring up the application just so that we have a visual of what we're discussing? While he's bringing that up, Mr. Lewis.
I have one potential preliminary item to consider as to this license. We have approved an amendment to the right of use policy. It is my belief, and I think Treasurer Manager Smith agrees, that we can't really consider pending application. You know, we have to consider it under the policy that was in place at the time. Can't just change a policy midway. If the applicant, or if the board feels it will be advantageous for this application to be considered under the new policy, because it does involve a variance requests. It might be better if they reapply and come back at a future board meeting to have it considered under that policy variance. I think that's something procedurally that should be considered.
Thank you, Mr. Lutz. I appreciate that. And so,
I apologize, Mr. Tharp, I should have contacted him beforehand about that potential issue coming up.
so in considering that, first thing I want to note is that Director Tharp had recused himself from discussion of this item, and that recusal still stands. I just want to be sure that that's clear on the record. I'm not entirely sure that this license is actually requesting a variance of the policy. It has been the stated, how to put this, standard of at least one board member that utilities that are paralleling our facilities would be placed at 5 feet below the invert of that facility. But I don't think that's written in policy. Am I correct with that, Mr. Gamboa?
So with the 5 foot below the invert, that's for the crossings. So we're paralleling, right? So it's gonna be the outside 5 feet of the EBID right away, and the depth of that would be at least 3 feet. For the
So-
utility line. And, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, please.
No, I would say in this case, they are kind of going above and beyond that, looking like they sent in a variance request ahead of our discussion of what was just approved. So they sent that in, and also they are looking at the depth on that. They're actually looking to go deeper than that. And then also they would add 2 gates on both sides of this section that they're talking about with this enforcement.
Mr. Lutz,
And Mr. President, I may be wrong, Mr. Campbell, and someone correct me. I thought there was an issue that it wasn't 5 feet outside the right of way.
Yeah, oh, yes, then not to the invert. So, yes, so it's 5 foot on the outside of the area. They have a variance request because there is a existing water line that is currently at that 5 foot mark.
I believe that's where the variance.
there it is. Okay. Well. I think that part's accurate. Policy requires it to be in the outside 5 feet of the right of way. Is that correct, Mr. Gamboa?
That is true, yes.
And this will not be placed in the outside 5 feet of the right of way?
This is, but I believe it's within the 15, and, again, I mean, this is a lot wider, this drain, the whole approximate right of way, is about 125 feet, and this bank here, I got it right up here to show you. So I mean, this bank has plenty of room, you can see here, the red line on the far right, that's the extent of our EBID right of way. The blue line here is our existing 12-inch water line. And then the green, that's a 10-foot variance from that water line to where the force main would be placed. And that'd be at a depth of about 7 feet.
I'm so cautious to even discuss the variance at this point. Let me be sure that I
And yeah,
have this procedurally.
so
So, Mr. Lutz, we have passed a amendment to our right of use policy. The application for this license occurred prior to that amendment. The applicant presumably would like to request a variance of which we would follow a variance procedure. Do they have to reapply? Or do we simply have to consider it at a separate meeting?
My feeling is if they wanted it considered under the new variance procedure, they would have to reapply. There's nothing stopping the board from deciding it under the right of use policy that was in place at the time the application was done. If the board felt like it wanted to apply the new variance procedure that exists in considering this, then the board's direction to the applicant would be to reapply. That's my feeling.
Thank you, Mr. Lutz. All right. Given that, we cannot apply the standards of the procedure for various requests as stated in the amendment that we just made for this license, because the application was submitted prior to that amendment occurring. Do we have the policy handy? Was I believe it states something to the effect of that licenses will be considered on a case-by-case basis.
that's correct.
What latitude does that give this board in deciding the appropriateness of this license?
You would be deciding it as variances had been decided in the past, which it did not have the specific standards you will have for future ones, but it was just decided on a case-by-case basis.
I support the guidance as given by Mr. Lutz, so given that, what's the will of the board? We can with a motion to approve this and then discuss it and vote whether or not to approve it. We can, I don't even know what we call it. Or request the applicant to withdraw their application and reapply in order to apply the variance policy. What's the will of the board? Mr. Smith, do you have a comment?
I have thoughts, but I'm not gonna say them.
Very good.
Okay, I'm not ready to approve it, but I will move to approve it so that we can discuss.
Motion to approve, license 2025-L-093.
Second.
Seconded by Director Sloan. All right, I appreciate the input from the land use committee. The engineering input that were received there, things that I still don't know. The standard of having it 5 feet below the invert was that I knew it wasn't gonna wash in. That is not going to wash in or wash out of our facility if you're 5 feet below the invert. You've got some cataclysmic event where our facility didn't matter any longer. If you're cutting to that depth. So,
Mr. President, just so we're clear, that has never been the policy. That is not an engineering standard. And yeah,
Only for crossings,
not crossings.
I appreciate that comment, and that is accurate. So, given and the determination from our engineering consultant that is an inappropriate standard. Mr. Gamboa and Mr. Rubio, I look to you for what is the standard and how do I determine based on the proximity to the design, I don't know what to call it, the design width of this facility, its design depth, that it is being placed in an appropriate depth. How do you inform me that it's appropriate instead of, I think, like, I don't know, that looks good. How do I determine that?
It's a good question. I'll ask for some input from Marty, actually. As far as depth, personally, me, when I worked with utility companies, sewer was always 1 foot under water depth. Of course, that was not around drains, so it's a completely different situation. What are your thoughts there, Marty?
And to help, Marty, what's your last name? Pillar? My concern is during a water emergency, there's going to be head cutting into our drain and emergency operations that have to happen on the drain bank. I need to protect our facilities and your utility from either of those things breaching in.
Yes, sir. Marty Pillar. What we're looking at on this is currently the standard with EBID calls out that the utility have a minimum 3 foot cover. What we're looking at doing there, since there is an existing water line, is that yes, we do want to be a minimum 1 foot separation between the bottom of the water and the top of the sewer. So our sewer line could be at a significantly greater depth than that. We have not potholed the water line yet. Simply because, there's the cost of potholing it. If we can get approval, it'd be great to have that as a condition on the approval that we do that. So that we come back in with revised construction plans showing that depth. Also, when we're looking at the distance from the sewer main to the actual drain, the slope of the drain, that would be significant head cut to get back to that area. And if it's, if we have a rain event that is that large, you're gonna have problems. A lot more than just this area, that would be a huge storm to be able to cause something like that. But, with our depth, I think that, head cut back, that would be. We'd be protecting the sewer line. The distance that is back from the main and the depth that we're at.
Thank you, Mr. Pillar. Mr. Francois.
I think that it's likely, based on my experience, improbable that that would wash in based on incidences that we have. I mean, it's almost zero odds. Secondly, I will state that that drain is also retired and not in use. Is that correct? So therefore, in the event of a storm, we're probably and most likely not going to be releasing water in that facility.
So this facility is
Currently not in use on campus. Yeah, well, if we maintained it and redug it out and put it back into commission, we could, but right now that is no longer in use for the district.
does it have a sealed outlet?
Yes.
Inlet. Sealed inlet. Oh, yeah, I visited this.
So there's an inlet to this drain from,
So there was a culvert that's been covered and the portion in front of this drain, just north, has been purchased and filled in.
right, so I mean, just. If this drain completely filled with,
At the end of this.
Yeah.
if this drain completely filled with sewage from this breached line, is there anywhere for it to go?
No,
You would have to open the gate
Yes,
into
there is
the
now.
town ditch.
you would
Okay,
have to
there-
open the gate, but they're putting gates on either side.
Okay, okay, Mr. Esslinger.
Mr. President, there is an outlet gate. It's a floodgate. That goes into the outfall channel. At the, right there where he's pointing there. That's the only outlet there is. However, that outlet, in my experience in the last 40 years, that drain has never been used for flood control.
Thank you. And Ms. Gambo, you said there was something about gating that further?
The harvest gates. So you're looking
Oh,
at right,
harvest gate.
yes, sir, so it'll be blocking off, both the, kind of your start and your end point of this line.
Mr. Clayshall.
Mr. Gambo, did I hear you say this will be buried 7 feet deep? Is that correct?
Yes, and that would be Marty, they would confirm that, but that's the discussion that we had, yes.
I mean, I'm just looking at the picture of this thing.
That's
And it
beyond
seems to
what,
me like if it's a force main, you have pressure on it. You're gonna, if it breaks, you're gonna see on the top of the ground before it's gonna go into that drain, I think. There's a lot more than 7 feet over the drain.
It will travel 7 feet faster than it will travel 25.
That's what I'm thinking.
so so in this case here, you can see, let me zoom out. So in this drain, like I was mentioning, this is a large bank that we have. So from the top toe of this drain to where this possibly this force main would be, you're looking at 20-25 feet. That's a huge bank. The average bank for EBID, maybe 12 feet, possibly 15. But in this case, there's a lot of room out there. So it's not at all close to, it's 25 feet off that bank or off the top toe.
Mr. Roverosa. Thank you, Mr. President. I still do not like the idea of putting sewage paralleling our property. And I think that we should have a policy particularly for this, even though Land Use Committee said that they did not recommend outright prohibiting it. But what I think we should do is prohibit it, and if there is a request for putting a forced sewage main in, then they apply for a variance under the new policy. And they present a risk mitigation plan to prevent any potential spills or to prevent the extent of the damage, to reduce the extent of the damage that could potentially be caused by a break in that force main. And once we have a good report on what the use, I think this is just too ad hoc. Once we have a good report on what the use of the land is, what the potential risks are,
And all of the ways that they're gonna mitigate those risks, such as using metal pipes, putting gates in the drains. You know, the depth of the force main, all of that. In a well formatted document, then I would be ready to grant the variance, or consider the variance, but not right now.
Thank you, Mr. Roverosa. And I know I concur with the general concern about the parallel use. Our facilities crisscross the valley, and there have to be ways to move utilities from one place to another when they must cross our facility, frequently multiple places. Parallel use is a significantly more concerning to me. I don't know what the right answer is. The fact that I don't know concerns me. Director Colquitt, do you have a question, comment?
And it's not gonna contribute,
Okay,
the question won't even
thank you, Director Colquitt.
feature me.
Mr. Roveros,
Mr. President, I would also like to add that I believe the major concern I have is not necessarily a utility paralleling our property. It is a sewage line. It's paralleling our property. I would be less concerned if it were just one. So I think we need a policy in particular for sewage lines.
and Mr. Roverosa, other discussion? Hearing none, the motion on the floor to approve license 2025-L-093. Hearing no further discussion is closed. I'm sorry, I have one more piece of discussion. Mr. Lutz. If the board does not approve this license, does it foreclose the applicant from reapplying?
My opinion, no.
Thank you.
Reapply under protocols.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing no discussion is closed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
I'm sorry, I state the name and it's there, okay. Garai was aye. Chris,
Aye.
aye. Tharp has abstained.
Aye.
Sloan, aye.
Nay.
Roby Rosa is a nay. Clay Schultz,
Aye.
aye. Colquitt, aye. And Ludwig,
Aye.
that is,
One
nay.
So I think it's just the count. That means if the count.
One.
Well, there's an abstention. 6 aye, one nay,
Seven
one
aye.
abstention. Was it 7?
6.
6 aye, one nay, one abstention. Opinion of the president, or well, it's not my opinion now. The ayes have it. The motion passes. The license is approved. That brings us to the conclusion of our open session agenda. Are there any other announcements or items for the open session? Hearing none, I will accept the motion to go into closed session.
So made.
I have a motion from Director Garai. Seconded by Director Sloan to go into closed session to discuss the agenda closed session items. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Being present, the ayes have it. The motion passes unanimously. We are in closed session. Secretary, if you would please pause the recording. Having completed our discussions in closed session, I'll accept the motion to come out of closed session.
I make the motion to come out of closed session.
I have a motion from Director Colquitt, seconded by Director Garai to come out of closed session. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We are in open session. I will note for the record that no items were discussed in closed session other than those other than those mentioned in the motion to go into closed session, which were the items listed on the agenda. Is there anything further in open session?
Mr. President,
Director Glacial?
I don't know if I can bring this up because it wasn't agendaed. It wasn't agendaed because I just found out about it pretty recently.
You may inform the board of something. We can't discuss it.
Okay, that's good enough. The New Mexico Water Quality Commission, where it met yesterday, there's an idea of, there's a bunch of produced water in southeast part of the state that shipped across the state line. Texas processes it, keeps the water and charges the producer for cleaning it up. And there's a thought in this state that we'll be considering keeping it here. So I have an email that I'm handwritten, if it's okay, 1 page, very short, no discussions, just people take and read.
I'll ask you to give it to the district manager and the manager can distribute it.
Good enough.
Thank you for that information, Director Glacial. Anything else for open session? Hearing nothing, I will accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion from Director Garai, seconded by Director Tharp. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it, the motion passes. It is 1:50 PM on August 13th, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.